Welcome to Life on Life Discipleship with Josiah Jones. This is a space where faith gets real. We're all about authentic discipleship, encouraging conversations and practical ways to live out your faith every day. No fluff, no cliches, just real talk about following Jesus and building others. Let's do this.
Well, welcome back to Life on Life, where we talk about how discipleship transforms us, not just in the good moments, but after we hit rock bottom. Today's guest knows what it looks like to chase success, lose himself, and find redemption through Jesus and through people who are willing to walk with him after his lowest season. Joshua Broome went from being one of the most successful actors in the porn industry to being radically saved, restored, and now used by God to help others walk in freedom. We're talking about discipleship after rock bottom, how Jesus restores our identity, how the church can walk with the broken, and why shame doesn't get the final word. Joshua, man, thanks for being with us in the studio today.
Hey, I'm so glad to be hanging out with you. And I think it's kind of interesting that, this is the first time we've got to hang out in person.
Yeah.
Because I just look back on so many conversations that I've had, even like doing stuff like this, and how many times you've probably done this as well. It's like, gosh, I wish that we would have hit record, when we were having this conversation. So I think, two extroverted, high energy people, who knows what we might say.
Come on. Well,
I mean that in the best of ways.
Yeah. I've been looking forward to this podcast for a long time. We've been talking about it, and it's finally coming to fruition. Yeah. So let's go. Let's dive right in.
Let's do it.
Joshua, you've shared your story with honesty and transparency a lot of different times. But for those of you that are listening or watching that might not be familiar with your story, would you just share a little bit about your journey? Walk us through, how did you end up in the adult industry and what was happening under the surface that entire time?
Yeah, I like to back up the childhood because what we don't have and the guidelines and the guardrails that we don't have, it impacts how we see ourselves and we see the world. And so for me, my mom got pregnant at 15, had me at 16, and this was in a really small town in South Carolina. And my dad was also in that town. So being in the same place where, everyone knows everything about your life, I knew that, okay, my dad was right down the street. And even so, my mom worked at this restaurant, and across the street was pretty much the only gas station in town. And it was called Rogers, and Rogers was my grandfather. And my dad was Roger Jr. And we, I could see him, and he would often go in the store, and I'm sitting in the restaurant, eating, after school or whatever. And I'm watching him, pull up in this, it's like seared in my mind, this green Z71 pulls up, he gets out, and it's almost like Groundhog Day, but the narrative slightly changes as I get older. He pulls up, gets out, comes back out, gets out. Now there's a kid. Now there's a little girl. And, so he gets married, has 2 kids. And I'm looking at this life that I'm not invited into, and I don't understand why am I not invited into this family? Yeah. Why did he choose not to be my dad, even though he's being their dad? And just the way that, attachment theory works, just the way that we understand and develop our emotions. It's like, as a kid, what doesn't make sense to me, I have to make sense of it, or, I'm just going to go crazy.
Yeah.
So what made sense to me was, maybe it's my fault. Maybe, I'm inadequate or unworthy, or there's something inherently bad about me that causes him not to want me. So if I'm the problem, maybe I can become the solution. So I go on this mission of, if I try to become enough, do enough, earn enough, maybe I would feel as if I was enough. And that was the kind of the memorial stone that kind of marked my life. And I went on this journey of, good athlete, good student, did all this stuff, and none of it was bad. But the thing that was driving me was the hope that maybe I could experience enough affirmation or awards or whatever, to make it feel like, gosh, maybe that would replace the desire to hear, son, I'm proud of you. Because that's what I was trying to earn. I was trying to earn. Yeah. And, so started modeling and acting around 13. I saw pornography for the first time around that same period. So a lot of opportunities. And seeing pornography, Romans 12:2 talks about we're either being conformed by the world or being transformed by the renewal of our mind. And, what we don't know is sometimes harmful, what we're not prepared to encounter. And that's why it's so important for, kids to have that foundational conversation. That's why it's so important for us to talk about it in discipleship and in churches. Like, this is what sex is. This is what intimacy is. And, I didn't have a foundation from anyone. I didn't have a dad in my home, or I wasn't plugged into a church. And I saw pornography, and that shaped how I believed that men connected with women. And I thought, well, maybe if I experience what I'll see, I'll feel what I don't. And that was another lie.
Wow.
Kind of embedded into my worldview. And then you kind of living like that led up to college, played college basketball, was in a fraternity, all this stuff, and just opportunities, with, a broken heart and a broken mind. It just more opportunities to experience brokenness and live that life. And then went to Hollywood to pursue acting. Had an opportunity to sign with a manager out there. Essentially, they were like, "Hey, we'll sign you. Just move out here." And I did, and things were going fine. And then 3 years into that, 2 years into that, I meet a group of girls at a bar, and they're like, "Hey, do you want to be in the porn industry?" And I was like, from the jump, I'm like, this is a terrible idea. No was what my head said, but my mouth was like, maybe. Why you ask? And essentially they were like, "Hey, we would love to just introduce you to our agent." And I'm like, well, what, how big of a deal could it be? I'll just go to the meeting and see. And I go to the meeting, and he asked me 3 questions. He asked me, how did I grow up? Which should have been a red flag. What was I doing in LA, and what did I hope to accomplish? And I said, well, I grew up pretty much me and my mom. So I gave him what he wanted. So he was a value proposition. It's like, hey, what kind of information can I extract from you so that I can use against you to manipulate you to do what I want to do?
Wow.
And then I was just like, well, I'm in LA, trying to act model. Same thing as a lot of people. And what do I want to accomplish? I think this is like really interesting. I said I wanted to be famous. And, rich and famous, it's kind of the same thing. It's vague and fictitious to a certain degree because there's no metric attached to it. Meaning that to what, like how many, followers or how much success or awards, like what is famous? Like, what is it? And if there's no, like, there's maybe this like idea of what famous is. And then when you reach it, I think more often than not, it's like, if I obtain X, I will feel this. And when you get to that mountaintop and you don't feel like you thought you would, you're just like, well, I just got to keep going. And rich is the same thing. It's like, man, if I think money is going to fill this gap in my heart, if the amount that I thought would do it, if it doesn't do it, well, I'll just keep stacking cash because eventually it's going to work, right? And it doesn't.
Yeah.
So he essentially promised me the world, and I say yes to something I should have said no to. And I did a film, and I didn't think that, it was going to cost me much, but it cost me 10 years of my life.
Wow.
And impacts my life still to this day, every day.
Wow. Man, that's powerful. I mean, what was the moment or series of moments when you realized that something had to change? Like this was a dead end. I mean, you talked about how, there was no metric, right?
Yeah.
And so it felt like a treadmill.
Yeah.
What was the intersection point where you're just like, man, I got to get off?
Yeah. So there was, so at the end of my career, in the porn industry, I had been nominated for Performer of the Year multiple times. And in 2012, I won the award that I was striving to win. And I thought that there was, that was going to be a means to the end of me feeling like I'm not good enough. And then when I won the award and nothing changed, the anxiety was amplified, the depression was deepened. And I thought, well, the only thing that makes sense now is for me to end my life. And I tried to take my life multiple times. And then there was this one time where I'm like, okay, like I'm going to have a strategy. This is going to work. This is what I'm going to do. But I need a little ammunition. And the ammunition I needed was the approval, or really, I needed someone's words to be catalytic in my thinking. I needed someone's permission. And the way I was going to get that was I was going to go into a bank And normally, when I got paid, I would just ATM, Dropbox. I didn't want to hand it to a person. And the reason behind that was on the memo of the check, there was always something antagonistic or graphic written on the memo. And it wasn't because it had to be there. It wasn't for, bookkeeping. It was to minimize me. It was to chip away at my humanity and my dignity, because if you minimize my dignity, I'm more willing to be manipulated. So, that's something I'm seeing in retrospect, not thinking in the moment. I'm just thinking, I don't want to hand this check to this person. But on this day, that's exactly what I wanted. I wanted to walk into a bank. I wanted to slide the check across the counter, and I wanted the person to tell me, you're disgusting as you think you are. And I walk in the bank and I slide the check across the counter, and she says nothing.
Wow.
And I'm just kind of standing there. It's kind of the middle of the day. No one's there. And so I'm like, tears streaming down my face. I'm shaking, I'm terrified. And I didn't know what to do, because she didn't give me what I wanted. She just handed me the receipt, told me to have a nice day. And I kind of stood there frozen. And then she ended up walking around the counter, and she put her arm on my shoulder, and she said, "Joshua, are you okay? Joshua, can I get you some help?" And to make that make even more sense of why it was so powerful, I hadn't heard my name in 18 months.
Wow.
Because I stopped talking to my mom. Any fraternity brothers that I had that was reaching out to me, anyone saying, "Hey, what are you doing with your life?" Anyone that wasn't in agreement with what I was doing, I didn't believe I could change. So the only thing that made sense to me was to push them away, because I just couldn't continue to let them down and then have them tell me, "Well, you need to change. You need to do something different," because I didn't believe that I could. So, in that industry, you go by a pseudonym, and it's on purpose. Literally, the guy was like, "I'll make you famous. I'll make you rich. So what name do you want to go by?" And if you remove your humanity from who you are, then you'll do something different than is indicative of you.
Wow.
I mean, you see this on social media, like anyone that does, this super antagonistic, there's generally there's a meme and an obscure username, because you feel like if I remove me from that, then there's no accountability or consequence to what I do. So in the same way, it's like, man, if I get you to go by something different regarding the porn industry, if I get you to go by a different name, then it won't be you doing it. So you'll be more likely to do something that you would say no to, but maybe that person, that variation of you, would say yes.
The irony, though, it always comes back.
Yeah.
It's like a boomerang.
Yeah.
Like you think you're getting rid of it.
Sure.
And then it just hits you like a ton of bricks.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about that. You removed yourself, like you separated the two.
Yeah.
But then tell me, go a little deeper, go a little granular.
I think like the reality is, when you suppress reality, the byproduct of that is chaos. Like you can't run from it. And I think, just for example, in that industry, I was dating a girl, and I was friends with people, but everyone that was in my circle was in the industry, because no one could truly conceptualize the life that I was living. And you're sitting at a table with someone that you're saying with your mouth that you're in a monogamous relationship with, yet the person across the table had sex with the person you're dating, and then I had the sex with the person that they were dating in the same week. But we're saying we're in a monogamous relationship, and we're saying that's just work. We're saying that it's not real. And I think the suppression of that reality is the same suppression of the person struggling with pornography, believing that it's not impacting their heart and their mind. And they're in a relationship with saying that they do. I believe they love the person they're with, but they're both hurting them and hurting themselves, and they're doing it in silence. And it's just, it's corrupting your heart and mind. And I think the byproduct of that, or the reality of that, is eventually it's going to come to the surface in some way or another. It will cause destruction. To what extent, who knows?
Yeah.
But the dominoes are eventually going to fall.
This is exactly what 1 Corinthians 6:18 says.
Yeah.
Flee sexual immorality. all other sins a person commits are outside the body.
Yeah.
But he who sins sexually sins against his own body.
Yeah.
So there's no, you can't separate the two.
Yeah.
That's in a sense of what you're saying, right?
Oh, 100%. And I love as the verse goes on, it's like, hey, know these things. You are not your own. You were bought with a price. So honor God with your body. So
value.
It's like, yeah.
I mean, the value you didn't have.
Yeah.
Now that verse is instilling value into you.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Yeah.
Sorry to cut you.
No. We're rapping.
Yeah.
But it's just like this understanding of, man, to a westernized concept or a westernized understanding would be, man, if X is super valuable, well, how much are you willing to pay for it? Because the value of something often, has a high price tag. So if we understand that the price tag in which Jesus says that we're worth is his life, that should carry a weight.
That's right.
On us. So I mean, it's all of that's pointing. It's not saying, hey, don't flee from sexual immorality because that's really bad and you shouldn't do it. Man, you're actually destroying yourself, and your body is actually a temple of the Holy Spirit. And God's not far from you; He's in you, and you're inviting that into you, and it's hurting you, and it's hurting Him.
That's right.
So be aware of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, man. So it's I'm in that moment, and with her saying that, it was like Acts 16. So the jailer, when Paul and Silas, they're imprisoned, and there's this earthquake, and the jail cells pop open, and the jailer that was there, he was like, man, I had one job, and capital punishment was the expectation. So he grabs the sword, he goes to end his life, and Paul just simply says, don't harm yourself, I'm right here. And she didn't say that with those words, but that's what I heard.
Wow.
Don't harm yourself, I see you.
And that's what you wanted more than anything.
Yeah.
To be seen in that moment.
And to the depth of, I had not been Joshua for so long that when I heard my name, it shook me.
Wow.
It shook me to my core because I was living in this plausible reality based on guilt, shame, lies. So Joshua was dead in a way, literally, but she said that. So then the first thing that made sense to me was for me to call my mom. My mom had been calling and texting me for a long time, and me just saying, I see it, but I can't have this conversation. And if I'm honest, it was because I was selfish and I didn't know how to navigate the problem. It's not that I didn't want to talk to my mom. I wanted to talk to my mom desperately, but I knew what she was going to say. You're better than this, son. What are you doing? And I wouldn't have an answer for that.
Yeah.
And I thought, I would have probably said that I'd done too much. I disqualified myself for being your son. But if I'm really honest, I was being really selfish, robbing my mom from something so simple of just knowing that am I okay?
Yeah.
Because I'm literally in an industry where as of today, 43 people have taken their life or died of overdose that were my friends.
Wow.
Close
just
to
your
me.
friends.
Just people who were close to me.
Wow.
I was literally to make this this is maybe a little too much, but I'm gonna say it anyway. But literally the porn industry got shut down because there was an HIV outbreak, and I had unprotected sex with someone who had HIV, and that person died. I should be dead. My mom was aware that the industry was shut down, calling me, asking me if I'm okay. And I was so arrogant and so prideful that I didn't answer the phone because I didn't want to deal with the conversation. So in that moment, what I felt was the conviction of, I want to talk to my mom, but I need to talk to my mom.
Yeah.
And so I made a beeline to my place, and I called her. And, like a good Southern mama, she chewed me out. She lit me up.
Rightfully so.
Yeah. And then she said, hey, I want you to know you'll always be my son. I will always love you. And again, you are so much better than the way you're living. Why don't you just come home? I was like, okay. So I called everybody I needed to call, and I found I didn't even sublease my place. I just found somebody that was like, hey, you can have everything in my apartment. It was all tricked out. I'm like, you can have it. Just you'll pay the rent, right? I paid the rent for the next 2 months. You'll pay it, right? Okay, good enough. Left.
Wow.
and moved back to the Carolinas. And then I was out of that industry, but what I brought with me was all the turmoil that wasn't dealt with, and build another kingdom for myself. So I was like, what else am I going to do? Strength conditioning. I love athletics. I love practice. I love training. So I found a mentor. So everybody calls him Doc. His name's Jason Davison. He was the strength conditioning coach for the Carolina Hurricanes. He serves as the strength conditioning coach for the Thor program at Fort Bragg. And he's just like incredible, intelligent man that is a great teacher, and poured his life into me. Introduced me to people that, gave me opportunities I did not deserve, but just like saw something in me. And then I built another kingdom for myself. Had a lot of opportunities, had the financial means to get a bunch of credentials, and just did all this stuff. And all of a sudden I was, successful in the health and fitness space.
Yeah.
But still very broken. And then just living a lie daily. I would just lie because like you were in Hollywood, like, yeah, I was just doing some stuff there. And then I would just lie until I got found out. And then when I got found out, I would deal with the consequences then. I was not living a life of integrity. I was not forthcoming whatsoever about my story. And I did that for about 2 years. And then 2 years in, you want to go here?
So
you want to stop?
Yeah, no, let's go here. Let me summarize.
Yeah.
So you get to a rock bottom moment in LA. Go into that bank. Bank teller comes along, puts her arm around you, and basically begins to speak identity into you.
Yeah.
Then you're too ashamed to call your mom, but God's moving you this entire time.
Yeah.
Convicts you enough to pick up the phone, call your mom. Thank God for good mamas.
Yeah.
I mean, she begins to speak identity in you.
Yeah.
And you're always going to be my son.
Yeah.
Nothing will change that. Sounds like the Father.
Right.
Sounds like Father God, right?
Yeah.
Like with us.
Yeah.
But then says, go and sin no more. You're better than this.
Yeah.
Come home.
Yeah.
Come back. You're going to be welcomed with open arms, like the prodigal son.
Yeah.
Right? And so let's stop here for a second.
Yeah.
I like how you gave more of your story after, but what was that pivot point? You're kind of in your rock bottom. You kind of come out of it because you got some people that believe in you, the bank teller, your mama.
Yeah.
But then you start living kind of a life of managing information, if you will.
Yeah. I mean, the way I describe it is like when I was like in the fitness industry, it was like I tried to put enough good dirt on my bad dirt so I didn't look dirty.
That's a good way of putting it.
Because what I believed is I can't change, but maybe I can do enough good to outweigh the bad so I don't look so bad.
Wow. And there's so many people right now
that do that every day. Yeah.
That do that every day. There's people listening, watching this podcast that are just, you're reading their mail.
Yeah.
So let's go to the pivot point of when you encountered Jesus.
Yeah.
What did that look like to come to faith, not just intellectually, but personally and powerfully?
Yeah.
Like speak to that person who's listening.
Yeah.
As you share your testimony.
Yeah. So it's like, 2 years of living that way. And I think it's really beautiful. I think about like Romans 2:4, like God's love, his kindness, his patience leads us to repentance. And I think God loved me so much that he allowed me everything that I thought would fix my life so I would realize it wouldn't. Growing up, in some, I've seen real poverty, so I hate to even say that, but, something about like growing up in government housing and being in line at the grocery store, my mom using food stamps, it made me feel a way that it shouldn't. And I thought in my head, man, if I had more, I wouldn't feel like I'm less. And then I get more and I just feel more of the same.
Wow. And
it's just like, this continuous thinking. And I just kind of led up to me being this place where, just like looking for something I couldn't find. And I meet this girl and, best athlete in the gym and, super fit and wearing like Iowa Hawkeye, everything. And, ask her on a date and she's like, no, thanks. I'm like,
rejected.
Yeah. And I'm like, oh, I'm in love, this is new, but just like, I was like, dinner, movie, coffee. No.
Wow.
No. She's like, look, I go for a long run before church on Sundays. If you want to meet me, Sunday morning, we can.
Were you a runner at that time?
absolutely not. I was like power cleans.
Now you are.
Power cleans and pushing a sled. I'm all about it,
Come on.
But I was like, whatever. And I show up and then I start thinking it's like, because like in these settings, like, the deal, like in a gym, like there's like a crowd that all hang out together. And like we were partying and doing all this stuff. And it's like Christmas party, like everyone's getting crazy and all this stuff. But I was like, man, she kicks everyone's butt in the gym. But like, then as soon as the workout's over, she's hitting the foam roller, then hitting the road, she's gone. It's just like, she's not about that life. And I'm just like, man, I'm pretty sure she has no idea about my story. And then I'm just thinking, I wasn't trying to be a man of integrity. I was like trying to watch my own tail. I'm like, man, before you hurt me or this blows up, I'm going to get out in front of it. I'm just going to tell you, hey, this is who I am. So before the run made its way to a run, I was just like, hey, I'm this kid that his daddy didn't want, and all the stuff that I've done that creates shame in my life, it's on the internet for the world to see.
Wow.
This is who I am. And, told her about the porn and pretty much did like a 5-minute monologue, like, this is how bad I am, and she was like, pretty taken back by everything I said. And then we just kind of walked in silence for a minute, and I didn't know if she was going to like tell me to leave or judo chop me in the throat. Like I didn't know what was going to happen. And then she stopped and looked at me like super serious. And when she did, she was like, hey, I don't want to minimize like what sounds like a very painful time in your life was. I don't want to say that I don't think that your decisions had real consequences. I don't want to say that. But what I do want to say is you are not defined by the worst thing you've ever done.
Come on.
And you won't be defined by the greatest thing you ever do.
Wow.
And the reason that is because you are not the author of you.
That's the gospel.
God is. Do you know him? And I was like, maybe. Yeah. No, I don't know.
I don't think so.
Yeah. And because like for me, like I went to church early on as a kid. It was like super like there's like Southern Baptist, and then there's like Southern Baptist. And this, I mean, no hate to the Southern Baptist, but like this church specifically, it was like if you had a wrinkle in your shirt or a tattoo on your arm, like you're burning.
Wow.
I mean, those were just the things that I remembered. But it was like, for good or for bad, like those are the only memories I had. And I was just like, whatever you're talking about, I don't got it. But I would agree, like, sure, like even the cosmological argument like made sense, whereas like there was an intelligent, spaceless being that was catalytic in time, space, and matter coming to existence at the same time. Like that made sense. But do I have a relationship with him? I don't know. So there was an acknowledgement, but not a substance of a relationship, certainly. And she's like, well, I've been following Jesus since I was in 7th grade, and I'm not perfect, but my relationship with him is the foundation from which I live my life. So what kind of food do you like? What? Like, you're nuts. Wow. I thought I was crazy. Like, you're crazy. And it's like, I was just so perplexed. But she was just like, what kind of food do you like? What are some of your goals? Like, what do you aspire to do? I was just like, I don't know.
This woman's unfazed.
Yeah. I just like to be jacked and ripped and make money. That's the only, what else is there, but it's like, it reminds me of like Colossians 4, where like Paul, like in prison, for preaching the gospel, praying for opportunities to preach the gospel, praying to do it with clarity, praying that he walks with wisdom towards outsiders. In verse 6, let his speech be gracious and seasoned with salt, so he might know how he ought to answer each person. It's this idea of, man, it's one thing to tell someone the truth, but to do it in a way that is gracious, man, that's impactful. And what happened in that moment is I got hit with a freight train of, what if I was wrong? What if what she was saying, because I thought the opposite. I thought I was certainly defined by what I didn't have and what I did do, not what was done on my behalf. But she was like, no. Like, you don't get to define you. So like your decisions matter and they impact your life, sure, but they're not indicative of your identity, because you're talking about who you are, and who you are, you don't get to decide. And I'm just like, man, is this true? Can this be true? And she just, the way that she responded, it was catalytic in curiosity. So then when she invited me to church, I was like, yeah, if church is the place that got you to respond like that, it's like, are there more people like that there? What is there to find out? And we go to church, and I hear this message based on, just expositionally preached from 2 Samuel chapter 9. And it's David, Mephibosheth, Ziba, and David saying, hey, he's recollecting this promise he made in 1 Samuel to Jonathan. Like, how can I show this loving kindness from God to God's people? And he remembers, Ziba is now serving under him, but he used to serve under Saul. And he asked him, hey, is there anyone left out of the house of Saul? And he's like, Mephibosheth is in this place, Lodabar, this place of no pasture, this like desert wasteland in Palestine. And, but I can go get him. I'll find him. And he finds Mephibosheth, and he brings him back. And Mephibosheth is thinking, man, this is doomsday, because the reason that, when he was 5 or 6, after his dad and his grandfather, Jonathan and Saul, were, they died in battle, this nurse picks him up and goes running with him and drops him, and he ends up lame in both feet. It's because historically he was heir to the kingdom, but he was heir to the kingdom where there was already a king. And history said that person was going to be sought after and killed because, they didn't want them to, try to overtake the kingdom. And the nurse was trying to do him a favor and dropped him. But he ends up at this place hiding. And now he's before David. And he's thinking, this is D-Day, this is doomsday. I'm going to be, and David's like, hey, I'm actually going to invite you into my kingdom. I'm going to give you a seat at my table, and I'm going to restore your grandfather's land. And it wasn't just any land, it was part of Canaan. Mm. So like a beautiful picture of grace. And what had me was like the way he responded. So 2 Samuel chapter 9, verse 8, he responds by saying, essentially, don't you know who I am? He refers to himself as a dead dog, meaning that, like, don't you remember who my grandfather is? Don't you know what I deserve? And I think so many times we find ourselves disqualifying ourselves from the grace of God because we think our sin or our history is more powerful than the cross.
That's good.
And David just kind of met him there. And then from there, the pastor went to Hebrews 12:2. And there was something about when he was talking about this joy that was set before Jesus as he walked to the cross, battered, beaten, bruised, bloody, broken, and he had joy in his heart. And as the verse goes on, talking about scorning our shame, seated at the right hand of God, I'm like, joy. I just couldn't get past that. And then literally, this is one of the few times that God has literally showed me a picture. And as I'm, my eyes are closed and I'm introspectively I'm just like over and over again, I'm like, joy, like that doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense. And it shows me a picture of a time in my life where death should have been my future. Mm. But there was a God, like Romans 5:8, there was a God that while I was an enemy of God, not when I was following Jesus, but while I was an enemy of God, death was approaching me and my Father stood in front of me.
Wow.
He showed me him saving me in spite of me. And then that joy became real because I understood, man, that joy came from love. There was a God that I wasn't so sure of that I became really certain of in that moment because that God loved me. Mm. And the Father that I always wanted, I realized actually I'd always had access to. And in spite of me running from him, he was running after me.
That's right.
And the only thing that made sense to me in that moment is to hit my face and to surrender my life. And, that was the day everything changed for me. And it's pretty cool that girl that shared that with me, her name's Hope, and she's been my wife for 9 years.
Come on.
We got all these boys, and life is wild. But man, I love that I get to talk about with you something I don't get to spend a ton of time talking. But it's the question that I get asked most. Now what? I speak at men's conferences and places all the time, and it's like, they confess the porn addiction, or, they told their wife this thing, or maybe they gave their life to Christ, or maybe it's a intersect or a transitional point where they're going from high school to college, or college into the workforce, or something's changing in their life drastically. Now what? You're stepping out. You're stepping out of the boat on the water. Now what? And I love that we get to dig into that.
Yeah, I want to affirm something in you, man. Like, I wasn't even planning on saying this. I prayed it earlier before the podcast that we would never graduate from the gospel.
Yeah,
bro. When you share your story and the pivot point on how Christ intersected your life, bro, it's about as real, transparent, and sincere as I've ever heard. Bro, it oozes out of you. The gospel bleeds out of you. And I'm so thankful that we captured that moment, because, man, you're a guy that I believe this is true about you. You wake up every day and you're reminded of how much God has saved you.
Oh, yeah.
And his grace is so tangible in your life. And it's evident. It's evident by the way you share your story of his grace. So, man, I'm proud of you. And
Thank you so much.
It's neat to see, like, just what God's doing as a result of that moment.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Life on Life. If this spoke to you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it, tag a friend, and keep the conversation going. Discipleship isn't a program, it's a lifestyle. So go live it out, love people well, and let's make Jesus known.